So I watched this movie last night called The Blue Box, and it was a really powerful film by an Israeli filmmaker whose name is Michal, and it was basically about her grandfather, who was a very pioneering Zionist from a town in Russia somewhere, and who went over to Palestine. Um, Probably, I think, in the sort of early 1920s, and he really had this idea of he was persecuted, part of a kind of you know a tradition of persecuted Jews, refugees, and the idea of the promised land, or the land without a people for the people without a land, and all that really resonated with him, and so he went over there. But what was at the heart of the film was a really confrontation between the filmmaker and all the myths around this man that had been told to her, and that he was this amazing sort of life-giving man who had been responsible for creating the world and the land that they all now lived in, and and this kind of airbrushing of history, and this and really at the heart of it, what she wanted to do was to make her family look afresh at the history of Israel, and to understand like that basically Israel is built on a conflict, on an injustice, on a colonial history, and that and tried to make her father and her family look at these facts, which to them were very, very difficult, was probably the thing which really, which I found the most interesting about the film. Because I've found when I write or when I share things about Israel and Palestine and Gaza, particularly with people who are very pro Israel and who have a very Zionist outlook on the story that's unfolding there at the moment, is that they just don't want to see, and that they, rather than having a clear argument, whether it be logical or a moral argument, they just get very angry, and that they don't really have anywhere to go that involves intellect. They only have this gear which shifts them into, I don't want to talk about that. And there was a moment in the film where that happened with, I think, her father.
במשפחה לא סיפרו לנו על זה.
לא נוח לי עם כל הסיפור הזה, לא נוח לי שקוראים לסבא שלי אבי הטרנספר, ולא נוח לי שאת עושה את זה.
יכול להיות שזה משהו שלא מדברים עליו במשפחה.
מה זה אומר?
במהלך המלחמה, מרבית האוכלוסייה הפלסטינית שהייתה בארץ ברחה וגורשה, ומה שהיישוב היהודי עשה, וסבא היה מאוד מעורב בזה, מניעת שיבה והריסת כפרים.
את יודעת מה נדמה לי? שאם את היית ב-48-9, היית עומדת יד ביד עם כל אלה שעשו whatever יקראת לי עכשיו, חוכמה קטנה מאוד לשפוט את זה כשאת נמצאת במקום אחר.
מותר לי לשאול שאלות, מותר לי להעביר ביקורת, אני חושבת, ואני חושבת שגם מותר לי לבקש מבני המשפחה שלי להסביר לי. הדור שלנו כל הזמן מנסה לחפור במה שקרה בעבר, ולא נותנים לו.
מיכל יקירתי, אני לא מעוניין להשתתף.
This is something that's really affected me on a personal level recently, where my own family, who are very pro-Israel, and part of them, I have members of my family born and raised in Israel, and my brother lived in Israel for a period, etc. And and they don't want to look at the other side of the story, and and I think, and in fact, a few years ago, when after I'd made Vodka Empire with Hillary, which is a film about my Ukrainian Jewish and Polish Jewish grandparents, I became much more acutely aware of what was happening in Israel and Palestine, and and was quite shocked at the misrepresentation of what was going on there, and wrote a lot about it at that time, and in fact wanted to write a book, and then got put off doing it by my family, who started becoming very angry with me and telling me, we will never speak of this, and I must unfriend you, and all this kind of stuff. And so there were a lot of blocks around talking about this. Like, we're not allowed to explore, we're not allowed to look at the history. And she says that in her film, you're stopping us, you're trying to stop us looking into the history. And that's just it. It's this unwillingness to look. And we saw that there's a movie by Jonathan Glazer, which has recently come out, and it's all about, a house with a wall next to, I think it's Auschwitz, and people just trying to live without thinking about it, and doing their nice garden, and all these types of things, and just this absurdity. And injustice thrives when good people look in the wrong direction, and I think that's really the message that I got from the film, but also that the courage and bravery it takes to look, and not only to look, but then to follow that look into commentary and creativity, and to start building things that really matter around the seeing of the thing, and not the brushing of things under carpets, which is kind of an endless deferral of problems for the future. And I think like that was also the legacy of her grandfather, and what he began to realize as one of these people who was very, very powerful, in the early days of Israel, and one of the major people who was involved in the state of Israel and the land acquisition which took place in creating this kind of Israel, this Jewish state, this place to allow those who had escaped the horrors of the Second World War. But there was a line in the film, and it was probably the most shocking line of the film, to me anyway. It was, we will take our revenge, for what's happened in the Second World War. We will have our revenge. And it was like, well, hold on a minute. The people who did, who perpetrated the Holocaust and who built the concentration camps were the Germans. They weren't the Palestinians. So there was this but there was a line that came from his diary which said, we'll have our revenge.
רק עתה מתגלות הזוועות שעשו הרוצחים הנאצים באחינו שבאירופה. שערי מדינות העולם נסגרו בפנינו. נדמה שעם ישראל נמצא בודד ומיעוטם. הנקמה שלנו, בניית ארץ ישראל.
It's like, well, hold on a minute. You're taking revenge on the wrong people here, and there's no... That doesn't make any sense at all. But it was almost like... Yeah, it was one of the moments which really struck me as the kind of darkest moment in the film, I guess. But overall, I think it was a very, very powerful film. And it proves my hypothesis, I suppose, that, because my son loves horror films, but for me the best horror films are documentaries, just things which explore the way people think, the way people see, the way people don't see when it doesn't suit them as well. And I think that is what that film showed so well and so interestingly. So I hope that was interesting, and thanks for watching.
שנעדפנו לתוכו.